My name is Amy Sinclair. I am 32 years old, and on a cold Saturday morning in February of 2023, I was standing in the doorway of my house when my father looked at the mailbox at the end of my front path and went completely still. The mailbox was new. I had installed it myself 3 weeks earlier at the end of a brick path I had relayed by hand over 2 weekends in January. It was a simple mailbox, black cast iron, traditional, the kind that suited a Victorian, built in 1902. There was a small brass plaque on the side. It read, A. Sinclair. My father was standing on the front porch of the house next door. The house I grew up in. The house he had just sold to my brother at $180,000 below its appraised value, without once in the 6 months he spent making that decision, picking up the phone and asking me whether I wanted it first. He read the plaque. He looked at the sage green Victorian behind it, the new windows, the restored porch, the front door standing open on a hallway I had refinished with my own hands on 12 consecutive weekend mornings. He looked at me. I raised my hand. A wave. The wave of a woman who lives next door. What my father did not know, standing on that porch with his coffee going cold in the February air, was that I had closed on this house 11 days before he made his Thanksgiving toast. 3 weeks before the announcement, before the gravy boat, before the applause. He thought he knew which of his children needed the family home. He had a picture of me in his mind. The independent one, the one who does her own thing, the one who would prefer her freedom. He had been carrying that picture for years and had never once thought to check whether it still looked like me. This is that story. My father's name is Frank Sinclair. He is 63 years old. He spent 38 years as a civil engineer at a municipal infrastructure firm in Asheville, North Carolina, and retired in 2019 with a pension and a woodworking hobby and a belief so deeply held it had become invisible to him. The belief that the child who stays close is the child who deserves the most. He drives a green Ford Explorer. On Saturday mornings, he goes to the workshop in the garage of 12 Elmwood Terrace and makes furniture that nobody particularly needs and gives it away to people who say thank you because that is the polite thing to do when a man you love hands you a chair. My father is not a complicated man. He is a man with a picture of each of his children and the serene confidence that the pictures are accurate. My mother is Ruth Sinclair. She is 60 years old. She was an elementary school librarian for 32 years, and she is the warmer of my two parents, and also in the particular way that warmth can function in a family, the more dangerous. My father makes the decisions. My mother delivers them in language that sounds like love. She is genuinely warm. She is genuinely kind. She managed 30 children at a time with grace and patience for 3 decades. What she could not always manage was the gap between her kindness and her honesty. The way a gentle framing can make an unkind decision feel, at least from the inside, like a generous one. My brother Owen is 35. He teaches high school history at the same school he attended as a student, which my father considers poetic and my mother considers heartwarming, and I consider neither good nor bad. Simply a choice Owen made that suited him, the way my choices suited me. He has dinner at 12 Elmwood every Sunday. He coaches the Quiz Bowl team. He is, genuinely, a good person who received something he did not ask for at a price he did not set. I want to be clear about that before I say anything else. Owen is not the story's villain. He is the person the problem benefited. That is not the same thing. My parents have lived at 12 Elmwood Terrace for 31 years. It is a 4-bedroom craftsman on a tree-lined street in North Asheville, solid and well-maintained, with the specific warmth of a house that has had the same family in it for 3 decades. The marks on the doorframe where my father measured our heights every birthday, the garden beds my mother has replanted every spring, the kitchen table where we have eaten approximately 4,000 meals. In September of 2022, it was appraised at $520,000. I am a residential real estate agent. I have been licensed for 6 years. I work at Caldwell Property Group in Asheville, and in 2022, I was the agency's top producer with $8.3 million in annual sales volume across 94 transactions. I know the Asheville market the way a cartographer knows a map. Every neighborhood, every street, every property that has sat too long, and every one that will move in a weekend. I understand valuations. I understand equity transfers. I understand, with precision and without sentiment, what a $180,000 family discount on a $520,000 property represents in financial terms and in family terms simultaneously. I understood all of it in the 37 seconds between my father finishing his toast and the table beginning to applaud. I passed the gravy. Let me tell you what the years before Thanksgiving look like so you understand what the gravy boat cost me to pass. Owen got married in 2018. My parents gave him a $12,000 cash gift and hosted the rehearsal dinner at 12 Elmwood Catered, the kind of evening that takes months to plan and represents a real financial commitment. And both of those things are entirely appropriate things to do for a child's wedding. I am not cataloging this as a grievance. I am cataloging it so that what comes next is legible. In March of 2022, I was named top producer at Caldwell Property Group for the year ending 2021. It was a public recognition. The agency held a small ceremony. There were 43 people in the room. My name was on a plaque. My parents came. My father left after 40 minutes because he had a woodworking project he wanted to get back to. My mother said she was tired. I shook their hands at the door and said I understood and watched them drive away in the green Explorer and stood there for a moment in the parking lot before I went back inside and accepted my plaque. That was the second time they had left one of my professional recognitions early. The first was in 2019, 30 minutes into a client appreciation event I had organized myself. In 6 years of selling real estate in their city, my parents asked me about a specific transaction exactly twice. Both times they asked how the client was doing, not how the deal was structured or what the number was. They said, "That's good, honey," approximately 40 times when I mentioned work and changed the subject approximately 38 of those times. I counted eventually. The counting was not something I decided to do. It was something I noticed I had been doing. I am not telling you this to make my parents sound like monsters. They are not monsters. They are people who had a picture of their daughter and never updated it. The picture showed a woman who was self-sufficient and independent and therefore did not need the things families give to the children they see as more attached, more present, more legible as needing. The picture was not inaccurate. I am self-sufficient. I am independent. What the picture missed was that self-sufficiency and the desire to belong are not opposites. They can both be true. They were both true. They are both true now. I heard about the house the same way I heard about everything my parents considered a family matter that they had decided, in advance, did not concern me. From Owen. The morning after Thanksgiving, he called at 8:22 and said he was sorry I had found out at the table. He said he had assumed our parents had spoken to me first. He said he would have said something if he had known. I believed him. I still do. The following morning, I called my father. My voice was measured. My question was direct. Had he offered me the house before offering it to Owen? "Amy, you've never expressed interest in this house," he said. He said it with the specific conviction of a man who has decided his assumption about his daughter's preferences is the same thing as her actual preferences. You've always been the one who does her own thing. Owen is here. Owen has always been here. We thought you'd understand. 2 days after that, I called my mother and asked why I had not at least been given the option. She said, "Sweetheart, you're so independent. You've built your own life. We didn't want to put pressure on you or make you feel obligated. We were trying to protect your freedom." She said it warmly, sincerely, with the complete absence of awareness that protecting someone's freedom by removing their options is not protection. It is a decision made about them, without them. At Christmas, 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, my father sat at the kitchen table with the mug he has drunk from every morning for 31 years and looked at me with the expression of a man who genuinely believes he has done something kind. "You're not upset about the house, are you?" he said. "We thought you'd be relieved, less to think about." I said I was fine. I passed the cookies. I had closed on the Victorian 11 days earlier. Here's what none of them knew. I had been watching 14 Elmwood Terrace since July of 2022, 5 months before Thanksgiving. The property directly next door to the house I grew up in. I noticed it go vacant in the spring when the elderly owner moved to assisted living. I watched it sit through the summer. The listing appeared in early June at $352,000 and proceeded to do nothing for months. I ran the comps in August. I walked the exterior. I identified every reason it was not moving: deferred maintenance visible from the street, an asking price approximately $40,000 above what the condition justified, a listing agent whose average response time to showing requests was over 48 hours based on my direct experience trying to book a showing in September, and a structural quality that was invisible behind the surface condition to anyone who was not looking for it specifically. I was looking for it specifically. I had been looking for it specifically in properties across the city for 6 years. 14 Elmwood had good bones, very good bones. Victorian-built bones from 1902 that had been buried under 80 years of deferred cosmetic work and needed someone who could see past the surface. I made an offer on November 4th, 2022, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, $40,000 below asking, 30-day close, pre-inspection completed the week prior. I did it myself, which is a thing I am technically qualified to do and which saved me approximately $400 and gave me a more complete understanding of what I was buying than a standard inspection would have provided. The offer was accepted on November 8th. Closing was scheduled for December 14th. I told no one in my family. I want to sit with that for a moment because I know what it sounds like. It sounds like strategy. It sounds like I was planning something. I was not planning anything except the purchase of a house I had been quietly watching for 5 months because it was the right house at the right price on the right street. I did not know on November 4th that 3 weeks later my father would stand up at the Thanksgiving table and announce the transfer of 12 Elmwood without looking at me once. I found that out on November 24th, the same time everyone else did. The offer was already accepted, the closing was already scheduled, the house was already, in every practical sense, mine. What I decided on November 25th, the morning after Thanksgiving, was simply this: I would not delay. There was no reason to delay. I had a house to close on and a renovation to plan and a life to build, and I was going to do it on the schedule I had already set. The closing happened on December 14th, 2022. I drove to 14 Elmwood after the paperwork was signed and stood on the front porch in the December cold and looked at the front porch of 12 Elmwood for 4 minutes. Then I went inside and made a list. If you are still watching, I want to ask you something before we get to what happened on moving day. Have you ever had someone assume they knew what you needed and then make a decision on your behalf that removed your ability to choose for yourself? I think a lot of the people watching this channel know exactly what that feels like. If you do, leave a comment below. Tell me your version. I read every single one, and I want you to know you are not as alone in this as it sometimes feels. The renovation took 11 weeks. I hired Pete Dugan, a contractor I had worked with on 8 previous client projects over 4 years. Reliable, fast, meticulous, and the kind of professional who does what he says he will do on the schedule he says he will do it, which is rarer than it should be. I was on site every day I was not showing properties. I scheduled showings in the morning and renovation decisions in the afternoon and finished work on the weekends, and I was at 14 Elmwood most days by 6:15 in the morning because the light was best in the front rooms before 7, and I was trying to match the original window trim color, and the light matters for that kind of work. New windows went in during the first week of January. 6/6 double-hung windows throughout, historically appropriate for a Victorian of this period. The porch was rebuilt in the second week, the original detailing restored using reference photographs I found in the Asheville City archives. The exterior paint went on in the third week. I had been looking at paint colors since October. I chose a deep sage green, not trendy, not safe. The specific shade the house was asking for, the color that made the Victorian detailing legible again after years of being covered by a beige that had never suited the architecture. Pete's crew applied it in 2 days. I stood on the sidewalk afterward and looked at it for a long time. There was 1 week in mid-January when I nearly lost the thread. I had a listing fall through on a property in West Asheville. A client who had been under contract for 3 months got cold feet 4 days before closing, which meant I lost a commission I had been counting on for cash flow and had to move money I had not planned to move in order to cover the renovation schedule. I sat in my car outside 14 Elmwood at 7:43 in the evening on January 16th, and I did the arithmetic 3 times, and on the third time I understood that I could cover it, but only if I did not take a single personal day for the next 6 weeks and picked up 2 additional buyer clients within the month. I sat there for a while. Then I went inside and looked at the hardwood floors I had spent 4 weekends refinishing by hand. The original oak planks coming back to life under the sanding and the stain I had matched to a sample I found in a local historic preservation archive. I looked at them for a while. Then I called 2 former clients whose leases I knew were coming up for renewal, set 2 appointments for the following week, and went back to work. By the end of January, I had the 2 new buyer clients. I had the renovation on schedule. I had a house that was beginning to look the way I'd seen it looking in my mind since August. The porch was finished. The mailbox was installed. I built the brick path myself over 2 weekends, laying each brick by hand in the cold. Not because I needed to, but because it was my path and I wanted to know every piece of it. Ruth sent a message in the family group chat on January 28th. Owen's closing date is February 18th. Moving day is February 18th. She added 3 heart emojis. I read the message at 9:53 in the evening. I looked at my move-in date, which was February 15th. I thought about rescheduling. I thought about it for approximately 90 seconds. Then I put my phone down and went back to the finish work I was doing on the back bedroom windowsill. I had a house to move into. The timing was what it was. My move-in date was February 15th, 2023. The professional moving company arrived at 8:45 in the morning, 4 men in matching gray jackets who worked with the specific efficiency of people who have moved a great many things into a great many houses and do not need to be told twice where anything goes. I had packed every box myself over the previous 2 weekends. I had labeled every box with a room and a number and a brief content description in my own handwriting because I do not like uncertainty, and I especially do not like it when it involves my own. The longings being carried into my own house on a morning I have been planning toward for 11 weeks. By 9 o'clock the bookshelf was going in. By 9:10 the kitchen boxes were stacked in the kitchen. The front door was standing open on a hallway with refinished hardwood floors that caught the February light in a way that made my chest do something I did not fully have a name for at the time. Something that was not quite pride and not quite grief, and was possibly simply the feeling of being exactly where you were supposed to be. At 9:15, a 20-foot Penske moving truck rounded the corner of Elmwood Terrace and pulled up to the curb in front of 12 Elmwood. Owen got out first. He was wearing a heavy jacket, the dark blue one I had seen him wear at family dinners for 3 winters. He looked at the house, his house now, the paperwork signed, the transaction complete. He took a breath. It was a good morning for Owen, and I had made my peace with that in the 3 months since Thanksgiving. His good morning did not have to come at my expense. I had decided to live in the version of this story where both things could be true at once, and I had been living there long enough that it felt like home. Then Owen looked to his left. He looked at the sage green Victorian. He looked at the professional moving crew working efficiently off the truck in the driveway. He looked at the open front door and the hardwood floors visible inside and the bookshelf being carried in by 2 men who knew exactly where it went because they had read the label on it. He walked slowly down the sidewalk until he reached the end of my front path. He read the plaque on the mailbox. He said, "Amy," not a question, not to anyone in particular, just the name, said quietly, to the cold February air. I appeared in the doorway of 14 Elmwood. I was wearing jeans and a heavy cream sweater, and my hair was back because I had been working since 8:45 and had not thought about my hair once. I looked at the street. I saw Owen. I saw my father and mother on the porch of 12 Elmwood. Frank standing very still. Ruth with her thermos stopped halfway to her mouth. I raised my hand. A wave. The wave of a woman who lives next door. Owen walked across the small strip of grass between the 2 properties. He stopped at the edge of my front path. He looked at the house. He looked at me. He said, "When did you?" "December 14th," I said. "It closed December 14th." He did the arithmetic in approximately 3 seconds. I watched him do it. December 14th was 6 days after Thanksgiving. The offer was accepted November 8th. 3 weeks before the turkey was carved and the gravy boat was in my hands. "Amy," he said again, different this time. There was something in his voice that was not surprise exactly. Something more layered than surprise. This specific quality of a man who has understood the geometry of a situation completely and is not certain whether to laugh or to apologize. He looked at the mailbox. He looked at me. He said, "Did you know? Before Thanksgiving?" "About the offer, yes." "About the announcement?" I paused. "No." He looked at me for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he started to laugh, not unkindly, genuinely, the laugh of a man who has understood something extraordinary and is responding to it with the only response that fits. He said, "The house has been yours since before Dad's toast." 3 weeks before, I said. He shook his head. He looked at the sage green Victorian. He looked at the mailbox. He said, "It looks good, Amy. It really does." He meant it. I knew he meant it. We have always been able to tell when the other one means something. From the porch of 12 Elmwood, my father said, "Amy." His voice carried across the small strip of grass between the two properties with the specific weight of a man who is locating himself in a situation and finding the location unexpected. "You bought the Hartwell place?" I looked at my father. "I did, Dad." He looked at the house. He looked at the mailbox. He looked at the sage green paint, the specific shade I chose because it was the color the house was asking for, because it honored the Victorian detailing that had been buried under 80 years of decisions made by people who did not see what was underneath. He said nothing for 11 seconds. I counted. My mother lowered the thermos. She looked at the house. Then at me. Then at Frank. Ruth Sinclair has spent 35 years reading rooms, first classrooms full of children, then the rooms of a family she has loved and managed and held together with the particular skill of a woman who understands, better than anyone around her, when something has shifted. She read this one in approximately 4 seconds. She walked down the porch steps of 12 Elmwood. She crossed the strip of grass. She stopped at the edge of my front path. She looked at her daughter. I looked at my mother. She said, "We didn't offer it to you." Not a question, not an apology. A statement, the specific statement of a woman who has just understood something she should have understood in August, when the Victorian went vacant, and her daughter, the residential real estate agent who has spent 6 years knowing every property in this city, never mentioned it, and who now understands why. "No," I said, "you didn't." She looked at the house, at the new windows, at the restored porch with its original Victorian detailing, at the mailbox at the end of the brick path I had laid by hand in the January cold. "You did all of this since December." 11 weeks of renovation. Pete Dugan did the structure work. I paused. "I did the detailing myself on weekends." She pressed her lips together. She had the expression of a woman who is not going to cry on a public sidewalk on a Saturday morning, but is very close to that line and is managing it with the discipline of a person who has kept her composure in front of other people's children for 30 years. She said, "It's beautiful, Amy." I said, "I know, Mom," without cruelty, without triumph, with the calm of a woman who has loved this street her entire life and has decided to stay on it on her own terms. "Do you want to see inside?" She said yes. She followed me through the front door of 14 Elmwood Terrace. My father stood on the strip of grass between the two properties for another moment. Then he followed. Owen watched his parents walk into his sister's house. He looked at the Penske moving truck idling at the curb of 12 Elmwood. He looked at my professional moving crew carrying my furniture through my front door. He looked at the mailbox one more time. Then he went back to his truck. He had a house to move into. So did I. In the week after moving day, my father came to the Victorian twice on the pretext of checking whether the front porch needed caulking, a thing he could not possibly have assessed from the street, and which we both understood to be an excuse to come and look at what his daughter had built. I let him look. On the second visit, I showed him the workshop I had set up in the back room, a proper workshop, with organized tool storage and good lighting from the north-facing window, and a workbench I had built from reclaimed oak I salvaged from the renovation demo, the original interior paneling from a back bedroom, which I had stripped and planed and sanded to a surface I was satisfied with after 3 weekends of work. Frank stood in the workshop for a long time. He ran his hand along the workbench. He said, "You did this yourself?" I said, "The layout, yes. Pete did the electrical." He nodded. He ran his hand along the oak surface again, the way he runs his hand along wood when he is thinking about it seriously, assessing it the way a person assesses something they respect. He said, "Good wood." He came back the following Saturday with his own tools, and without being asked, spent 4 hours helping me with the garden beds along the south side of the property, the beds I had planned but not yet had time to build, the beds that will have dahlias in them by April and something taller at the back by summer. He did not apologize on either visit. He did not explain himself. He simply showed up with his tools and worked alongside me in the way my father has always understood work, as the language of care. The specific grammar of a man who does not always know how to say a thing, but knows how to show up and help build it. For Frank Sinclair, that has always been the same thing. I am beginning to understand that. I am not sure it is enough yet. I am not sure it is enough. My mother called me on the Tuesday after moving day. She asked if she could take me to lunch. We went to a place on Lexington Avenue we have been to a dozen times over the years. A restaurant I have always loved for its light in the late morning. She did not say a great deal at first. She held her coffee with both hands the way she does when she is thinking. Then she said, "We assumed we shouldn't have assumed." I told her I heard her. We ate our lunch. We talked about the garden beds. We talked about the dahlias I am planning. It was not a complete accounting of what had happened, and we both knew it. It was the first honest step toward one, and we both knew that too. I will take honest steps. I have been taking them my whole life. I did not buy this house to prove something. I want to be clear about that, because I think it is easy to read this story as a revenge story, and it is not one, not entirely, not at its center. I bought this house because I had been watching it since July, because I knew its bones, because I had spent 6 years learning this market, and when I looked at 14 Elmwood Terrace, I saw exactly what it was and exactly what it could be, and I knew I was the right person to do that work. That is the whole story of why I made the offer on November 4th. The Thanksgiving announcement did not create the decision. It simply clarified something I had already, without fully articulating it, understood, that I did not need to be given a home. I was already buying one. What I have thought about in the months since moving day is the specific distance between who my parents thought I was and who I actually am. My father's portrait of me, the independent one, the one who does her own thing, was not wrong. I am independent. I do my own thing. I have been doing my own thing in this city for 6 years and doing it well. What the portrait missed was the part underneath the independence, the reason the independence exists in the first place. Not because I do not want to belong, but because I have always known that the only belonging worth having is the kind you build for yourself on ground you own. I bought the house next door because I wanted to be on this street. I wanted to be near this family, my family, who see me more clearly on some days than others, and whom I love anyway and perhaps more honestly now than before. I wanted to be near them on my own terms, in my own house, with my name on the mailbox. Freedom and belonging are not opposites. My parents gave my childhood home to my brother because they thought I preferred my freedom. They were not wrong that I valued it. They simply did not understand that you can value your freedom and still want to come home. That you can be the one who does her own thing and still want to do it on the same street where you grew up. That the independent daughter is not always choosing distance. Sometimes she is just choosing a different door. I am 32 years old. I live at 14 Elmwood Terrace in Asheville, North Carolina. in a 4-bedroom Victorian I'd bought for myself and renovated myself and moved into on a cold February morning while my family was arriving next door. My mother has been to visit 6 times since February. My father comes on Saturdays with his tools. Owen and Lisa had me to dinner last month at 12 Elmwood, and I sat at the kitchen table I grew up at and passed the bread, and it was a good evening. An ordinary evening, the kind that is only possible when the hard things have been looked at honestly. I think some of you watching this know exactly what it feels like to be opted out of a decision about your own life. To have someone who loves you make an assumption about what you want or what you need. Act on that assumption with complete confidence, and only understand what they did when the assumption runs up against the reality of who you actually are. It is a particular kind of invisible. The specific invisibility of being known well enough to be loved, but not well enough to be asked. If that is you, I want you to hear this. You do not have to choose between belonging and becoming. You do not have to stay small to be included, and you do not have to announce anything to anyone. You can simply build the thing, quietly, on your own schedule, and let the mailbox do the talking. Here is the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want to know the answer in the comments below. Has someone ever made a decision about your life based on who they thought you were, rather than who you actually are, and how did you show them the difference? Tell me. I read every single one.